Welcome to episode 3 of Beowulf, Beowulf's Manly Speech. Beowulf has heard of the great monster Grendel and has traveled far to ask Hrothgar's permission to defeat Grendel. Now he has to convince both Hrothgar and his men that he is worthy to do so. Throughout his speech, Beowulf will use ethos. He will do so by providing examples of things that he's done that are really, really manly and really, really awesome. Like any good claim, Beowulf will have a counterclaim. This counterclaim will be represented by a character named Unferth. Unferth is going to bring up a person named Breca, who, according to Unferth, has defeated Beowulf in past conquests. Unferth's story shocks the crowd. What will Beowulf say to Unferth's story about Breca? Like any good Anglo-Saxon tale, this episode begins with a big party. We don't actually get to Beowulf's speech until you see Beowulf spoke. The text begins with "the hero arose." This hero, of course, is Beowulf. We also learn that he is surrounded closely by his powerful thanes. His thanes are like his men, his followers. The party remained under orders to keep watch on the arms. In this case, arms mean weapons. The rest proceeded, led by their prince under Heorot's roof. Now, if you remember, Heorot Hall is Hrothgar's mead hall. And standing on the hearth in webbed links that the smith had woven, the fine forged mesh of his gleaming mail shirt, resolute in his helm. We're getting this imagery to prove that Beowulf is a manly man. He is a warrior. So he has his webbed links, his fine forged mesh, his gleaming mail shirt, and his helmet. This is a list of all of the armor that Beowulf wears. By wearing this armor, again, we see an example of ethos with Beowulf proving that he has past conquests, he has money, he's fought lots of enemies, thus he needs this beautiful armor. So he should be respected. The text continues with Beowulf's speech. Notice the quotation marks to show the reader that Beowulf is actually speaking here, not the narrator. Beowulf says, "Greetings to Hrothgar." Again, he must address the king first. "I am Hygelac's kinsman, one of the hall troops. When I was younger, I had great triumphs." Notice the repetition here with I. So again, he has a lot of ethos here. He's got to prove himself to the king. During Anglo-Saxon time, men, particularly warriors, identified themselves by their male family members. So if your male family member, like Hygelac, had many triumphs, you would identify with their triumphs by claiming yourself as their kinsman. So the very first thing that we learn about Beowulf is that he has a powerful kinsman named Hygelac. So again, Beowulf employs that ethos. Trust me, I've got a good family. So Beowulf says, "When I was younger, I had great triumphs. Then news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home." So he's heard about Grendel. "Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall." So how has he learned about Grendel? Well, he makes that clear. He's heard about Grendel from sailors who brought the story to where Beowulf lived. And again, I can mark that with an S for summary in the margins. Beowulf continues, "Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall." Here, Beowulf is talking up Hrothgar's great mead hall. Again, he must pay homage to the king. "How it lies deserted, empty and useless, whence the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome." So we get a lot in a short period of time. Here, Beowulf is using this great imagery to describe Hrothgar's mead hall, Heorot Hall. It's deserted, it's empty, and it's useless. That's how it is now. To contrast that, he uses that word once to signify that he's going to contrast. It used to be the evening light, and it now hides itself from heaven's dome. So, the once great hall is now deserted and empty. So first, let's track this imagery. As you probably already noticed at this point, we do have this religious Christian imagery with heaven's dome, and that's something else that we can track. Beowulf continues, "So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come here to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew of my awesome strength." So everyone supported his idea to come to defeat Grendel because he has this awesome strength. So again, we get this ethos. Trust me because the elders and experienced councilmen of my kingdom say that I have this amazing strength. Now we get this pronoun they. So we look back to the pronouns, the antecedents rather, that I highlighted or boxed in, and I look back to see what this pronoun is referring to. And in this case, I can clearly see, because of my annotations, that they refers back to the antecedent of elder and experienced councilmen. So Beowulf continues by saying that they, the elders and experienced councilmen, had seen me boltered in blood of enemies when I battled and bound 5 beasts, raided a troll's nest in the night sea, slaughtered sea brutes. I have suffered extremes and avenged the Geats. Their enemies brought it upon themselves. I devastated them. So again, we get a lot of ethos, a lot of manly warrior traits, and he has to give these examples of when he's defeated his enemies and been covered in blood, as he says, boltered in the blood of his enemies. So here is this list of enemies that he's defeated. We have the 5 beasts, the troll's nest, the sea brutes, and then he just generalizes by saying all of the enemies. So again, let's track this. So we have the ethos here of these examples. Again, hopefully by now you've noticed the pagan images. So not even 5 lines ago or so, he was just talking about heaven's dome, but then we switch right back to these pagan images of the troll nest, the sea brutes, the 5 beasts. So again, we see this flip-flop back to these pagan images, and we can track that in the margins. So we have all this ethos, all these manly traits, and then we get this transition word of now. So he's like, that was in the past, I've done all these great things, I've slaughtered all these enemies, but now I mean to be a match for Grendel. So now it comes to the point. Settle the outcome in a single combat. So we've known from episode 2 that Grendel has devastated all the warriors that are there. So not only is Beowulf going to defeat Grendel, but he's going to defeat him in one fight. And so, my request. So here we know what he's going to define, which is his request, so we can box that in. And then he gives more flattery to the king, O king of bright Danes, dear prince of the Shieldings, friend of the people and the ring of defense. So here we have this pathos by playing to the emotions or to the pride of this king who can no longer defend his own people. My one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Heorot. This idea of purification brings us right back to Christian ideology. This reminds us of a Jesus figure who can purify sins, and in this case, the sin is Grendel. So Beowulf will act as the Jesus figure and get rid of the sin, which is Grendel, with my own men to help me and nobody else. I have heard moreover that the monster scorns in his reckless way the use of weapons. So again, we learned something new about Grendel, that he cannot have a weapon used against us. And this is something that we can track in the margins. In order to paraphrase, I changed the word weapons to arms, and that was a vocab word we learned earlier in this episode. So again, Grendel has defeated all arms. Therefore, to heighten Hygelac's fame, his kinsman, and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and shelter of the broad shield. the heavy war board. Hand to hand is how it will be, a life and death fight with the fiend. So again, we learn Beowulf's plan. He's going to renounce or throw away his sword and broad shield, that big shield, and heavy war board. He calls the shield his heavy war board. And he will fight Grendel in hand-to-hand combat because, again, he's manly. He's the manliest man that ever was, except Hrothgar. But that's something that we can summarize in the margins. He continues, whichever one death fells must deem it a just judgment by God. So whoever dies has to see this not as fate, but as God's command. And again, we flopped right back from that pagan imagery of the last column to Christian imagery through this idea of God with a capital G. Now we'll jump into the hypothetical. So we can tell that because he says if. So here's the first scenario. If Grendel wins, so I'm going to box that in as well because now he's going to define what would happen if Grendel wins. It will be a gruesome day. He will glut himself on the gates of the war hall. He's going to eat everybody. So we get this verb, this violent verb. He will swoop without fear on that flower of manhood as on others before. Then my face won't be there to be covered in death. He will carry me away as he goes to ground, gorged and bloodied. So we get all this awful imagery. He will run, gloating with my raw corpse, his dead body, and feed on it alone. He's going to eat him in a cruel frenzy, fouling his moor nest. Because remember, Grendel lives on the moor. No need then to lament for long or lay out my body. If the battle takes me, send back this breast webbing, so his armor, that Wieland fashioned, and Hrethel gave me to Lord Hygelac. Fate goes ever as fate must. So again, you've noticed here, fate, we've got even this repetition of fate. If I die, it's fate. Not God, like I just said 10 lines ago. No, it's fate. So he's flip-flopped here back to this pagan imagery. I have also tracked that violent imagery that he lists off for if Grendel wins the hand-to-hand battle. Also, I've summarized this final section here. If Beowulf dies, he just wants to send his warrior gear back to his king. So again, he's proving his manly trait that he's not afraid, even though he fully accepts that his body will be gorged and bloodied, and that the monster will feed on his body in this moor nest. That's okay. If he dies, he accepted his fate. All he asks is that you send back his warrior gear to his king. That's how manly of a warrior is. The bottom of this section reads, Hrothgar, the helmet of Shieldings, spoke. So we get this nickname almost for Hrothgar. So I'm going to box in his name because they're defining him here. He is the helmet of the Shieldings. He is the guardian of them. So he finally speaks. Beowulf, my friend, you have traveled here to favor us with help and to fight for us. So at this point, Beowulf would be inwardly not showing this weakness, but he would be a sigh of relief because the king is accepting what he's saying, at least so far. In the top of the next section, Hrothgar is going to mention many, many people. He talks about Beowulf's father. He talks about this man's name, which I can now pronounce. We get this proper noun. The South Danes are mentioned here, which is a group of people. We get this proper noun, and this proper noun. I'm looking for the capital letters here. So you're going to need to be able to summarize who this line of people is. Again, the reasoning here is he goes back in line and he pulls out all these men because we judge, or Anglo-Saxons judged their male warriors, which were their only warriors, based on the male line. As we move down, we'll see this section is talking about the seasoned fighters, the other warriors that were there at Harrod Hall, and what they do after the manly speech. Of course, being an Anglo-Saxon text, we started with a party and we're going to end with a party. So the final section, it actually kind of starts here, but all the way to the end, we're going to get this really big party scene. All right, now it's your turn. You're going to summarize the male line, which is where we boxed in all those proper nouns, summarize who all those people are. Track the Christian imagery, track the imagery of the party, and summarize what the warriors do at the party. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.